Now, the next issue we need to talk about is troubleshooting video problems with a notebook system. Working with video on top of a notebook system is problematic. The main issue you have to deal with is the fact that the display is an integrated part of the notebook system itself. With a desktop system, if we've got a bad monitor, what do? We unplug it, throw it away, and go get a new monitor and plug it in, right? Easy. Well, with a notebook system, it's not that easy because you can't just swap out monitors, at least not without a lot of effort, to test whether or not the monitor itself is bad. Okay? That LCD is very difficult to get at, and it's very difficult to replace. Let's talk about some of the things you can look for and things you can do to troubleshoot problems with video displays on a notebook system. The first commonly experienced issue with the LCD screens that are integrated into a notebook PC is you have dead spots. If you're experiencing a slowly increasing number of dead spots on your LCD screen, or if you've got entire rows or entire columns on the LCD screen that are dead, then you've got a bad LCD assembly, and there's not a whole lot you can do. If you've got your screen over here, your LCD screen and your notebook system, and you've got an entire row of pixels right here that no longer works, or if you've got these big blocky dead spots that don't work anymore, or maybe an entire row that doesn't work anymore, the LCD assembly is no longer any good. Remember, the LCD is made up of a grid of wires with your pixels there, with your liquid crystals, and it means that something's gone haywire probably with one of the wires or with the liquid crystals between the two plates itself. What can you do? You're going to have to, A, get a new notebook system, or B, remove the casing from around the LCD. And by the way, if you do this, be aware that it will probably void the warranty if it's still in effect on this notebook system. You can remove the bezel from around the LCD, and you can unplug and remove the LCD unit, purchase a new one, and put a new one in. Be warned, if you do that, they are very expensive. They're extremely expensive, and they are hard to come by as well. You don't just run down to your local computer store and say, hey, I need a new LCD assembly for my XYZ notebook system. They don't stock them. You're going to have to go back to the manufacturer. My experience has been that the cost of replacing the LCD is usually so high that you're better off just buying a new notebook system itself. The cost difference won't be that much. The way that you can do this cost effectively, however, is look for notebook recyclers on the internet who specialize in purchasing old off-lease notebook systems and selling them for either parts or as refurbished notebook systems. In those situations, you might be able to purchase a system that maybe has a dead hard drive or a bad motherboard, but does have a good LCD screen, and scavenge the LCD screen out of it and replace it. Like I said, if you try to just buy the replacement part, you're looking at a very, very high cost. The next issue we want to talk about is that of flicker. Now, if we're working with a desktop system that uses a CRT monitor and we're having flicker issues, more than likely we're dealing with a synchronization rate problem, right? We're either driving the monitor too slow or too fast, and it's causing the CRT monitor to flicker. Well, flicker with an LCD monitor is completely different because it doesn't use a cathode ray tube the way a CRT monitor on a desktop does. It's not supposed to flicker, basically. If you're experiencing flickering problems, it's usually one of two things. It's either a problem with your backlight or with your inverter inside the LCD display. Now, every LCD monitor on a notebook system has what's called a backlight. It's just a light, and it's usually positioned right up here, and it might actually use fiber optics to disperse the light evenly around the screen. In the old days, it didn't. You could tell with LCD monitor, the backlight would come on, and like the top of the screen would be too light, too faded, and you couldn't see it, and the bottom would be so dark you couldn't read it. Modern LCD displays work really well. They usually use some kind of fiber optic wire to distribute the light evenly around the screen. If your backlight is going out, your display is going to become dim. Now, when we say flickering, the backlight might be going off and on, and that would cause your flicker. If your screen just goes dim permanently, that's a pretty good sign that your backlight is just gone. It doesn't work anymore at all. However, one thing to watch for when you're dealing with the backlight is the power save mode of the notebook system. Now, this backlight draws a considerable amount of power from your notebook system batteries. Most notebook systems are configured by default to either turn off or significantly dim the backlight if you're running off of battery to extend the amount of time that you can run the notebook system off of batteries. So make sure that the dimness is not due just because you're running in power save mode, but is actually due because the backlight itself is failing. This happens pretty frequently. The one thing that happens more frequently and really does cause a lot of flicker is if your inverter starts to go bad. Now, inverters inside of the LCD screen are extremely problematic. They're getting better. Back in the early days of notebook systems, you'd have whole batches of LCD screens coming out from the manufacturers that had very, very flaky inverters. And when the inverter starts going bad, your screen starts to flicker, it's hard to read. So again, this unit can be replaced as well. These two units are much less expensive to replace than to replace the entire LCD assembly. So it's actually not that big a deal. And these parts, because they do have to be replaced every now and then, are much more readily available than an actual LCD assembly itself. But once again, if you're having problems with your backlight or if you're having problems with your inverter, you're not going to run down to your local computer store and say, hey, I need an inverter for my XYZ notebook system. They're going to say, sorry, we don't stock that. You're probably going to have to go back to the manufacturer and purchase an inverter from them. The next issue we want to talk about is no display at all. You turn the system on, you hear the fan come on, you see the hard drive spinning, but nothing comes onto the screen. When this happens, your first thought is going to be, oh no, my LCD assembly is dead. I got to go buy a new one. It's going to cost me a fortune. I just might as well go buy a new notebook system. Before you run out and buy yourself a new notebook system, check the obvious first. This no display issue can be caused by a variety of different things that are very easily remedied. First of all, check your video output function. Most notebook systems are designed to output the display to either the built-in LCD, to an external VGA monitor, or to both at the same time. Many times you're using your notebook system and you've got it hooked into a large screen monitor for a demonstration or a presentation or something like that. You toggle the display from the LCD to the external monitor and you forget to switch it back when you're done. So the next time you turn the system on, nothing appears on the screen. You panic, you think your LCD's gone, when in fact all you're doing is redirecting the output to the VGA port on the back of the PC. So that's the very first thing to check. Toggle with your function key. Usually it's a FN key with like F7, F8, or something like that that will cause the display to be toggled from either the LCD to the external monitor or back. Check that first. Now, if you do check that and it truly does not display on the built-in LCD screen, the next thing you need to do is to start troubleshooting to determine if it's the actual LCD screen itself that's bad. One thing you can do is to take your notebook system and plug it into an external monitor, like we talked about before, on the VGA port. Why are we doing that? Well, if we have a known good VGA monitor over here, and we plug it into the port right here, then we can use this function key again to toggle the display from the LCD to the external port. If you do this and the screen does display on the external monitor, but still will not display on the built-in LCD screen, then we start to get nervous because at that point it's looking like that LCD screen might be bad. If the output will go on the VGA monitor, you know that your integrated video board on your notebook system's motherboard is working just fine. The problem is probably with the LCD itself. So what do you do if that's the case? You've plugged it in here, you cannot get a display on the LCD, you can get a display on the VGA. What do you do? Well, the first option, and the least expensive option, is to just leave that VGA monitor plugged in, use the notebook system as though it were a desktop system, and believe it or not, I have seen a lot of organizations do this very thing. The LCD's gone bad, it's been dropped too many times, the LCD's quit working. They just convert this notebook system, which, you know, the modern notebook system is quite powerful, can run applications very, very well, just convert it into a desktop system, plug a VGA monitor into it, off and running. However, if you do want to get the LCD running again, there's a couple things you can check. One is the LCD cutoff switch. On most laptop systems, there's an actual switch located between the hinges right about here that is depressed when the monitor lid is closed, and it's released when the lid of the notebook system is opened up. Usually with most notebook systems, when you close that lid, when this switch is depressed, it tells the system to stop sending the display to the LCD monitor. When it's opened up, the switch is released, and that causes the display to be enabled on the monitor. It is possible for this switch to get stuck, especially if it's an older system that's been dropped one too many times. It's possible for this switch to get stuck in the down position, which will not allow the LCD to come on. The other thing to look for, the obvious, look for cracks in the bezel around the LCD. This happens a lot when notebook systems get dropped. That's an indicator that you might have some serious damage inside to the LCD assembly itself, which might need to be replaced. Another thing to look for, and this happens quite a bit too, is look at your cable bundles. On your LCD system, you usually have two hinges right here, right? And you have your cutoff switch right here. Well, two different cable bundles run into your LCD display through these hinges. One side is usually your power, and which side it is depends on the manufacturer. Check your system specifications to figure out which side is which. And the other is usually your video output from the video card or the integrated video display on your motherboard. These hinges get open and closed, open and closed, open and closed, open and closed. And these power bundles are designed to be flexible. They're designed to, flex with the lid as it opens and closes. It works in a much similar manner as the wiring in the door of your car. If you've got power windows and power locks in the door of your car, you've got a cable bundle that runs through your door into the chassis of your vehicle, and that cable bundle carries power to the power door locks and power windows. And if you've ever had problems with that, you know what I'm talking about, because the door of the car gets open and shut, open and shut, and open and shut. If it happens enough, many times the wires inside that cable bundle will start to break. If that happens, your power locks don't work anymore, your power windows don't work anymore. Same thing can happen on a notebook system. Opening and closing, opening and closing, opening and closing. Do this over and over and over. Sometimes the wires inside these cable bundles will start to weaken and crack and fray. If that happens, then you can have problems right here. The way you check it is to remove the bezel from around the LCD, get at the hinges down here, and you'll be able to visually inspect and see if they're creased or kinked or otherwise broken, which might be causing the problem. If that happens, once again, you can go to the manufacturer. Usually these cables, those are modular, meaning they have a plug on one end here and a plug on the other end down here, and you can remove the cable, plug the new one in, and get the system back working again. Once again, that part is not something you go down to your local computer store and buy. You're going to have to go to the manufacturer and get it, and it will be relatively expensive when you do. In this lesson, we reviewed some of the common issues you're going to have to troubleshoot with video problems with a notebook system. As we said before, this is not an all-inclusive list. You become very familiar with your laptop manufacturer's website, visit it often, use their knowledge base to troubleshoot specific problems that occur with your particular notebook system.